Today we're making the video how to find trout streams to fish in Wisconsin and how to fish them. Because I think people had that question with my videos, like how I was choosing a certain structure to fish in the streams I fish. So the first thing I do is go to Google and I type in, you can type in Wisconsin trout streams or with WIDNR and you can get to the page. So you click on the WDNR website in Google and then you can go to Recreation and click on Fishing Wisconsin right here, and then it has all these things here, and you can scroll down to, you can click on trout fishing, and here the first thing that says Fishing Wisconsin Trout, and it said there's maps of Wisconsin trout, classified trout streams, and there's catchable size trout stocking, which shows the creeks that are stocked annually with trout. And there's public access mapping that shows you access guides. So if you click on maps of Wisconsin trout streams, for example, say today we want to go fishing in Sauk County. So I'm at a stream I've never fished before. So we'll click on Sauk, and this will, one of them will take you to a map of the trout streams in the county. So like here's a Sauk County color map that shows us the different streams in the county. There's not that many creeks in Sauk County, but they're kind of spread out, but I sort of know which ones we want to try fishing today. And we can see whether they're class A, class 1, 2, or 3 streams by their color. So the class 1 streams are green, the class 2 streams are blue, and the class 3 streams are a dark blue. So for example, the class 1 streams have good natural reproduction. So if you look at the streams, I think the closest creek in Sauk County to here is Otter Creek, which Otter Creek is a class 1 creek, so that's the first creek we're going to try, which means it has natural reproduction. And we just had a bunch of rain, and it's a small high gradient creek that starts in the Baraboo Bluff, so we're going to try that out. And the second creek we're going to try out is Seeley Creek, which is another class 1 creek, which should have good reproduction. And to see what stock, you can go on trout stream maps, and it says stocking here, and then there's a stocking database. So if you click on the Sauk County part of the map, and you can click on like whatever creek you want. So if you click on, that's Seeley Lake, not creek. Seeley Lake was stocked with bass. But like Seeley Creek is stocked annually with brown trout fingerlings, and the Otter Creek we want to go to hasn't been stocked since 1979 and was last stocked with brook trout. So I think we'll mostly catch brook trout there, but we're going to find out. And then you should be able to go to public lands too, or else you have to keep your feet wet when wading in the creek. So if I get back to the map that says public access on trout streams, we can launch this mapping application on GIS that shows us where there's public land to fish on the trout streams. And it's slowly loading. So if we go to the county we want to go to, Sauk, we can see where the trout streams are right here. And here's Otter Creek, and you can see there's a state and natural area on Otter Creek, so there's public land for us to fish on it. And what does the green, and there's green along Seeley Creek. I don't know what the green means. So we're definitely going to go try Otter Creek. And then we're going to drive to Seeley Creek or Honey Creek, which is here. And Honey Creek is class 2 and Seeley Creek is a class 1. And we're going to see what happens. And I'll talk about the baits when I get there that I'm going to use. So look forward to that. So I didn't go through what I use for trout fishing, so I'm just going to talk about what I use. So here I have my rod I use, which is a Shakespeare ugly stick that is 5 foot long, and it has a casting 5:2 to 1 gear ratio. You want like a 5.0 or 5.2 or 6 to 1 gear ratio. If you can get that in the spinning reel, I don't know exactly right now, but you want a gear ratio that's pretty high and fast because you want to be able to pull in your spinners going downstream pretty quickly. And with a small reel, it's not like you're pulling in a lot of line at once. So a higher gear ratio can pull in more line at once when you're reeling downstream with a spinner. Or you need to reel in a crankbait or fish some bait fast. And I have this drawing with 6-pound monofilament. You could also use 8 or 10-pound fire line, which is probably fine for fishing with spinners or artificial too, because if you have a fast moving bait, I don't think the trout really can care if you have braid or mono. But if you're fishing slower moving baits like a fly or a worm, they can definitely tell the difference between mono and floral or floral and braid. So this is strung with 6-pound mono. A lot of people use 4-pound mono. You can use 8-pound mono too. It's just harder to cast these really light baits when you're fishing with them. And you also can get away using a walleye rod. And actually, if you're fishing in a larger creek, it's actually nicer to fish with like a 6.6 medium action rod because you get a better hook set, although you can horse in the trout better. Whereas if you're fishing in a small creek that's tight quartered, it's a lot easier to cast and fish with a shorter rod and to be able to cast up and stuff with a shorter rod. And on the creeks my adventure took me to this day, you definitely wanted to have a shorter rod because in the first spot it was really tough casting where I was fishing at. So it really depends upon the types of creeks. Like if you're fishing larger creeks, you can use a longer rod. But if you're fishing tight quartered creeks where you have a lot of brush and stuff to fish, it's better to have a short, like 5-foot ultralight or light action rod. And it's harder to set the hook on bigger trout with a lighter action rod. That's what I've noticed. And my hookup rate will be better with spinners if I use like a medium action pull versus my ultralight pull. So that's what I use for a rod. And you also, if you're going to go trout fishing in Wisconsin, you need a copy of the regulations that you can read, and it says like the individual creeks for each county, and it has a map that shows the creeks that are found within each county. So like if I look at the county I live in, it has the different colors for different regulations, and like the red is special regulations and the yellow is base county regulations in this county. And in the county I was fishing, it's the same way. And for the creeks, I'll fish with the base county regulations, which is 3 a day, 8 inches, and you can use any type of bait that you want to use. But some of the red rules you can only use artificial lures on. So you need to make sure you account for that, and you need to make sure you look on the county map, and you want to look on Google or get a Wisconsin road atlas map, which I would highly advise to buy if you're going to explore these rural streams, because you don't always have great cell phone reception out in the country where I'm driving around. Even though there's people that live there, it's a lot of it's just dairy farms and abandoned dairy farms and hunting land, so it's not like there's a ton of people there and good cell phone reception anywhere. And you can use that to like find the certain road crossings, and once you know where the creek is at, you can use this to see where there's bridge crossing to the creeks. And I usually start off fishing at bridge crossings and then fish upstream from the bridge crossing or downstream depending on whether it's private or public land. It's better to fish in the upstream direction because all your noise gets carried downstream and you don't stir up sediment in the creek, because if you wade in the creek when you're going upstream, you begin to spook up the water and make it all cloudy. And for baits, I throw a lot of spinners. I use a lot of these Panther Martins here. This is a number 4. And that's my best bait. And if you're going to throw spinners, I would choose, you can catch fish on colored spinner blades or like this one, which is some wood shaft spinner. Or you can catch fish on a metallic colored blade. I usually do best with blade colors like the silver or gold seem to work well. If it's really bright on the creek's clear, you're going to want to use a silver bladed bait. But the gold blade might work too. If the creek's dirtier or it's cloudier, I seem to do better with the silver gold colored blade or these colored blades. And I've had some Panther Martins which are like rainbow trout or brown trout color that I've done well on too. I think the spinner strike is more of a reaction strike than anything. And the trout in these creeks, the first two creeks I fished in this that I said to go to were just loaded full of chubs. So the trout in those creeks probably eat a lot of chubs and common shiners, and they also eat crayfish once they're bigger, and they eat a lot of snails and worms and whatever insects or insect nymphs are abundant in the given creeks. Like I cleaned a couple of the fish I caught yesterday, and their stomachs were full of crayfish in the last creek that I fished at. But they'll also just have whatever's really abundant in their ecosystem in their stomach. But the bigger fish like to eat like crayfish and minnows a lot. And I also fish with worms, and for brook trout, you're going to want trout worms, which I have here, which are smaller. And sometimes for bigger browns or rainbows, you might want to use night crawlers. And I usually just use like a size 6 hook or 4 hook or 8 hook, depending on the size of worm you're using. If you're using a bigger worm, you can use a larger hook. And I usually just cast it upstream and let it drift downstream through pools or bends, or I'll cast it right below a rapid and let it drift through the pool below the rapids. And you just want to let the worm drift through like a natural bait. And I know a lot of fly fishermen frown upon fishing with worms, but it's definitely an effective method to catching trout, and it definitely works. And you're going to want to have some really small split shots too, because if the current's fast, you want to get your bait to go down a little deeper in the water, but you don't want it to snag in bottom. So you have to have the right weight of split shot to drop the bait down to bottom. So that's important if you're going to fish worms. And like the spinners, you can just cast up in the ripples and pull them through the ripples and cast them through pools or reel them down through pools. And I've even had luck where you take the spinners and cast them downstream and just jig them and let them sink down to bottom and then jig them again, or cast across the pools and do that. You just want to change up the retrieve. Like, you don't want to always do the same retrieve. You want to have some irregularity, because one day they'll want the spinners casted up in the rapids. Like, it's a couple of my videos I've made. Like, I'm catching fish in literally a foot of water, and other days they were wanting the spinners just jigged in pools, so the trout are holding down deeper. So it really depends upon the day what you want to target. And I like using spinners a lot because they're really versatile and they can be fished fast or slow, and you can get them to run really high in the water, you can get them to run down deeper. And they cover a lot of water, so I like using them. Another bait I use are crankbaits. I do well with like Rapalas or Yosuras, or like these little jerk bait or twitch baits like these. Floating Rapalas also work, countdown works, and so do the jointed Rapalas. This crankbait that came in the MTB trout box, which I'll post a video on too. This I was getting hit on, but for some reason I couldn't hook them in, and I lost a really nice one on it. So a bait like this would work too. You just want to either like alternate reeling these in and twitching them in too. Like, you don't want to constantly do the same retrieve. But with the crankbait versus using a spinner, they don't want the lure casted upstream and reeled downstream. For these, you want to cast across the creek and reel it across the creek, or cast downstream and reel it upstream, or twitch it upstream like a jerkbait. Just do a jerk pause retrieve, and just keep changing up how you retrieve it. Don't retrieve at the same rate every cast unless they're only hitting one way, because they want some irregularity. And also, I occasionally, and for the crankbaits, you're going to want a deeper creek with like deeper bends and pools. You're not going to want to fish them in a shallow creek that is all ripples, because you're not going to, they don't seem to work very well in that type of habitat. But whenever you have like deep pools and deep bends where it's deeper, and in larger creeks, the crankbaits seem to work better. In the small creeks, it's pretty difficult. I'm not saying I haven't caught fish in small creeks on the Rapalas, but they're not as effective as a spinner would be in that setting. And they also do sometimes well with like little plastics, like this Berkeley Power Bait minnow. or other little plastics, or these cast masters or little Cleos or little casting spoons. And for these, you want to do the same thing as I said with like a crankbait. Like some casts, you just slowly reel them in. Other casts, you like jerk, pause, and just get it to flutter out all erratically. And you keep fishing the bait depending on what the fish tell you the mood they want. And these seem to work best in deeper pools and want you to like drift it downstream and let it sink down to bottom and like slowly reel it in or jerk it in for me. But I have caught fish just reeling it downstream too. But this is not as effective a bait as the spinner. And like these jigging style baits, for some reason, if you have deep bends or pools, seem to work best there too. And I just let it sink down to bottom and jerk it and let it sink down again and jig like I'm jigging for walleyes and target like current breaks and cast it into that. So this type of bait works too. And then I'm going to show you some clips of some of the fish I caught and try to describe them. And then I'm just going to make another video of Sauk County trout fishing because I caught a bunch of fish and this is already turning into a long video. So we arrived at the creek. Right here is the bridge. And I just set up my rods. I'm just going to use 2 rods right now. I have one rod with just a little inline spinner, which I'm going to start out with. And I have another rod rigged up with a hook. And I have some worms, which I'm going to use. So I bought some night crawlers and trout worms. I'm going to start out with the trout worms because this is a brookie creek. I'm going to see what they want. And you can see well. So there's different types of structure in this creek, and this area has riffles down there. Then there's a run that's like 2 feet deep, and you can see some fish swimming around in it. And like up here, there's a pool and some riffles. So I'm going to target this variety of structure. And we got ourselves a creek chub. Perfect walleye bait. Interesting stream. Third species out of here, like a pumpkin seed green sunfish cross. This is quite the trout stream. So we're at spot 2 on this creek. It looks like a little tiny brook here, and we're up in the Baraboo Bluffs, and it's pretty clear. We're gonna see if we can get anything to go here. After fishing the first spot, which was down one where the creek flows into a glacial outwash and it gets flatter, I went up into the Baraboo Bluffs region of the creek where it was a lot more gradient, and there was like this little waterfall, and I fished a big pool beneath it, and all I caught in the pool was chubs, but I did have one trout hit a spinner in by the rock in the back of here. And then I decided to drift my worm up in the riffles below the little fall ledge, and there I managed to get a trout. So the trout were related to the ripple structure right above the pool, like where the dissolved oxygen was getting mixed in, which is when it's warm out, the trout like to sit by where there's riffles in the creek or falls or things, and because the water flowing over rocks adds dissolved oxygen to the creeks. Or where there's springs coming in where there's cool water. And I was trying to fly fish here because I was trying to do some other challenge I was doing, and I kept missing trout in the riffles on my fly rod, and I just managed to catch chubs on my fly rod on a little nymph I was using. And I did manage to get one trout in the pool underneath the bridge on a worm though, and I wanted the worm just drifted down the creek this day. And I fished here longer than I wanted to, and I tried to fish a spot between the 2 spots that I fished in. There was like deep pools there, but all I was holding in them was chubs again, and I caught more chubs. So I caught a ton of chubs at this first creek, but I did manage to get some brookies, and it was beautiful scenery and a great adventure. So we don't know where you're going to end up when you choose a random creek. So the second creek, I went to the first bridge where I drove over there. The creek looked kind of decent under the bridge, and then I waded upstream, and it was really shallow. And I seen a few chubs swimming around by the bridge, but I didn't have any strikes at the first spot, and it didn't look like there's a lot of habitat. It says it's a Class 1 creek above this bridge, and a Class 2 creek below this bridge. Not that that means anything, and they may not even know how good the fishing is here. But then I went down stream farther and fished at another bridge, and I fished a couple pools which were like 3-4 feet deep that actually looked really nice, and I caught out of them were chubs. And then I waded upstream a little farther at the second spot, and I caught some common shiners too. And I never even fished worms. I just fished with some jig and twister tail from my mystery tackle box and the spinner I was using, and I caught chubs and common shiners on both of them. And then I decided to kept fishing upstream, and then I ended up catching one like 14-inch brown trout on the spinner I was using, which kind of released itself before I got a good picture of it because it was not very happy. But it was a nice brown trout. So I did catch a trout here, but my guess is there's not tons of trout, but there's some trout, but who knows, there may be big trout because there's all sorts of chubs and common shiners for them to eat in this creek, which is perfect food for the big brownies to eat. So this may have some big trout in it. I don't know how many trout are actually in it fishing. This last creek I decided to go to is Honey Creek, and this is a Class 2 creek that they have Trout Unlimited, and people have put a lot of money to do habitat work, and then they've narrowed it and made the creek deeper. So you can tell that it's really grassed over. Like in areas you can hardly see the creek. But it is like 2 feet deep in a lot of spots, or 3 feet deep, so there's lots of habitat for fish. So I started off drifting worms here. All I caught drifting worms down the creek was a chub. In these creeks that are really grown over, what you can do is just put a worm in the middle of the stream and just let out like 10 feet of line and let it drift downstream, and maybe trout will eat it when you drift it by them, and you catch a lot of grass. Or you can just wade up the thalweg of the creek, like what ended up working for me, and cast upstream with spinners and catch a lot of grass too. And you just got to cast right straight up the center of the creek where there's no grass. And that tactic ended up working out really well. And I caught this trout, which is about 15 inches, and I caught a bunch more trout using this technique on like a yellow spinner, and I caught them on a rooster tail style spinner too. And farther downstream where I found a pool, I was using a twitch bait, and I did get one hit to hit a twitch bait too. All in all, it was a great afternoon of trout fishing. So basically, finding these new creeks is you can just go and look at potential trout waters that are in the regulations, and just go and try to fish them from a bridge for a little while and look where there's private or public land at. And you go and try them, and if you don't catch anything, don't go back there. But if you go to the creek like the last spot I fished, that's probably a better spot to fish in like March and April. But there's definitely tons of fish there, and the last spot I fished was a good creek. So this is my video on how to find spots, how to trout fish the creeks, and how to find spots to trout fish. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed yet and you like my videos. And I know this is a long video, but thanks for watching if I held your attention this long. I really appreciate it.